What's happening, everybody? On today's show, the latest CFB playoff rankings are out. Chris Marler joins us to break them down. Georgia now number one. We've got Jimbo Fisher and Arnett being fired. Who should those schools target? And 3 SEC games in Week 12 we'll take an early look at. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's happening, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, let's dive into it. Welcome in our buddy Chris Marler. He is part of the Saturday Football Uncensored podcast. Marler, how are you, sir?
I'm good, man. I'm good. We're getting closer to Thanksgiving, which is good. Also sad because it means football season's winding down. But very good day today. Very good day and weekend as well, football. So, yeah, ready to go, man.
Man, that was like a real serious answer.
I don't know what that was. That was at the ending, too. I don't know what that was.
I don't know how your day really was.
Yeah, it wasn't even that great. I don't even know why I said that.
All right, let's dive into it. New batch of college football playoff rankings. And, man, we get Georgia coming in at number 1. I guess let's start there, and we'll kind of work backwards. But thoughts on them finally putting Georgia 1 after it had been Ohio State through the first couple batches?
Yeah, I think that what they've done with 1 and 2 at least, right? And you can make an argument for 3 and 4 and maybe 5 through 8, maybe. But what they've done with 1 and 2 so far in the rankings, I think has been consistent and correct. I think that they've had the correct teams ranked in the correct spots the first 3 weeks. And I think that Georgia, that schedule left a lot to be desired for a lot of the year. And what they did this weekend, I don't think it takes anything away from Ohio State. Ohio State's a really good team. They still have a really good resume, all that kind of stuff. And there's some meat still left on the bone. But my God, I mean, Georgia just took a top 10 team to the absolute woodshed. And you want to talk about that's a team that put up 50 plus against LSU. And you can say whatever you want about LSU's defense, but they have scored on everybody. And you get into a 14-14 game and they put the clamps down for the rest of it. I mean, it was a very, very impressive win for Georgia.
Yeah, and so here we are. Georgia's 1, Ohio State 2, Michigan 3, Florida State 4. So not much change there. I do think it is interesting. Washington sits at 5, Oregon 6, Texas 7, Bama 8, and Mizzou up to 9. Very good for Mizzou. But of these teams, we know Ohio State and Michigan are going to play each other. Florida State's got a really good chance, and I think we agree, right? If Florida State runs the table, they win the ACC, they're in. Washington's an interesting one because, we could see a rematch between Washington and Oregon in the Pac-12 title game. Is that right? So yeah. Winner of that one would have a really good chance. But do you judge it differently if Washington's undefeated as a Pac-12 champ versus Oregon as a one-loss Pac-12 champ, or do you think either way that team has a great chance?
I think it depends on what's in front of you, because if Florida State goes undefeated, I don't think that Louisville game really matters, right? Like it's not going to bolster their resume at this point. Like they're going to get in if they're undefeated. I think that like Oregon, you look at it right now, even if the resume is not as good as Texas is like, because from like a scheduling and an opponent's record standpoint and all that, Oregon, I don't know if they should be ahead of Texas. I mean, them and Michigan are the only two that have had only 2 opponents that are Power 5 opponents with winning records. It's the 2 least out of all the contenders. And I think that Bama and Florida State are sitting there with 5. So I don't think that Oregon just necessarily gets in. But as of right now, for whatever reason, the committee definitely likes that resume better than Texas's.
Yeah, it's just kind of fascinating here on what could play out and all the different scenarios. It does scream, man, they do not respect Texas. I mean,
Right.
with what the Longhorns have done, I mean, I think they've played some tough Big 12 teams, but, even if Texas wins out, they're not guaranteed to get in, and they've got one of the best non-conference resume wins of anyone.
Well, and I tell you what, and they probably have the most impressive win in the country at this point still, and have since week 2. You could easily make that case. Here's the thing for Oregon. Oregon is still going to play most likely 2 top 12 teams, or top 15 teams, right? Like Washington and Oregon State. Oregon State and Washington played this weekend, which is a huge, huge game. Oregon State could absolutely win that game. I think the line's only 1 right now. But I think the Pac-12 is as solid as it's been throughout the entire year. It's still the place with the most possible potential for chaos and cannibalization from a Power 5 conference.
For our audience here, just the other SEC teams, Ole Miss, they were 9 a week ago. They fall back to 13. So they didn't fall that far after loss to Georgia. But obviously, once you get to these rankings, none of these teams really have a chance to make the playoff. But you're talking about teams that are in contention for a New Year's Six bowl, still something to play for. And I think Ole Miss is in a good spot there. LSU comes in at 15. That's amazing for where LSU was a couple of weeks ago. And for being a 3-loss team, to be at 15, I think is quite impressive. Tennessee hanging strong at 18, but man, they could either move up or fall back with this big game against Georgia this weekend. And that's kind of it for the SEC. But really, for argument's sake here, Marler, with Alabama at 8, there is still, and call me biased here, Mr. SEC guy, but I think there is still a world where undefeated Georgia plays 1-loss Alabama in the SEC title game. Bama wins on a game-winning field goal. I think there's a world where both teams could get in. I know the Ohio State-Michigan thing gets funky, but let's say Ohio State just blasts Michigan.
Yeah.
Beats them 50-14. I think Michigan you take out of the picture, and if one of these other teams ahead of them trips up, there's a world where Georgia and Bama could both get in.
There is. I still say, well, no, I would say it's more likely. I mean, the only thing that I think could lead to that is I don't think Ohio State would have to blast Michigan. If Ohio State beats Michigan, Michigan is done regardless.
See, if but Michigan get so much respect. I have a coworker who was telling me I think Michigan is one of the best teams in the they are the best team in the country. He's not even a Michigan fan. It's just this weird.
Why does he think that? They have. I hear so much about how many players they have that could be drafted, but they haven't played anybody. I will say that it's really super impressive that they were able to run the ball strictly in the second half. They didn't throw the ball at all in the second half and beat Penn State. But this whole thing about Michigan is still it's kind of built on a facade. Part of the reason why we've loved talking about Michigan is they have the number 1 scoring defense in the country, right? Let alone, they've played the 65th ranked strength of schedule so far. I don't know how just playing Penn State jumps you from 111 to 65, right? Especially because the rest of the teams you've played are still on that schedule. That being said, so much of this is not so much, but a lot of this has been built on, JJ McCarthy's been awesome. JJ McCarthy's a Heisman candidate. One of the funniest things that I've watched in a broadcast all year was after the game against Penn State, when Michigan basically said 2 things. We are good enough to beat Penn State without having to throw the football. And also, J.J. McCarthy is not going to be a Heisman finalist because Heisman finalists, those teams depend on the quarterback to win games. And J.J. McCarthy didn't have to throw the ball in the second half. They ran the ball 30 straight times. So they showed in the Washington-Utah game, they were these are the 3 best quarterbacks in the country. And it was Michael Penix, Bo Nix, and J.J. McCarthy. I just think that the path is Louisville has to beat Florida State, and somebody has to lose in the Pac-12. I think a 1-loss Oregon team would get in, but if Oregon loses to Oregon State and then beats Washington, then that is the path.
Give me a quick thought on the SEC championship game, since we did get that settled this week. It is going to be Georgia and Alabama, but I thought Marler was, if you asked me to set a line on it, I was going to say, my initial thought was Georgia by 7, and then I said, you know what, probably 6.5 would be a good line. the early Vegas books have 4.5. Just
it was
early
3.
thought on it. Yeah, I mean,
it was at 3. Like, that is. So here's the thing I'll say. I was shocked when I saw it, and my first thought as a Bama guy was, "Whoa, that's good. That's good news," because Vegas is not usually wrong. Also love this picture that you're showing right now, because that is from the last time they played in Atlanta. Now, if you want to talk about a house of horrors for Georgia, it is playing Alabama in this setting and in Atlanta specifically. 2012, they got their heart ripped out. 2017 Natty, you got your heart ripped out. 2018 SEC Championship game, you got your heart ripped out. And in 2021, you got your ass stomped by Alabama, despite being a 7-point favorite there. That was one of 5 games that Alabama has been an underdog since 2008 under Nick Saban. And they, before the national championship game, they had won all those games outright. And they had won all those games, I believe, by double digits. Now, that being said, I would have set the line at 6.5. And I would feel fine betting it, and to be honest, at Georgia covering 10.
yeah.
And just the last thing I'll say about it, like, I get what Vegas, I always give them a lot of credit, and you should. But one thing about Vegas, they have not been accurate and correct about Bama all season. You look at the Texas game, USF, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas A&M, LSU, and Kentucky. Those are 7 games they've played this year out of 10 where they have been wrong by at least 7 points in the line they have set for that game.
Wow. Well, we've got plenty to discuss that game, and I can't wait. I hear the spiciness in your voice. I'm already ready for that championship game. But we got 2 weeks to play, and we got a cupcake week this week. So we'll get to some of the games that matter, and we'll also get Marler's thoughts here in just a second on some coaches that are no longer coaching in the SEC. That's next. I want to remind you guys, this episode is presented to you by friends over at eBay Motors. Look, passion, drive, and patience. It's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. We're into speed, power, or style. eBay Motors, they've got you covered. Over 122 million parts are there for your number one ride or die. You're always going to find exactly what you're looking for. With the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. ebaymotors.com. All right, we welcome in Chris Marler as we roll on here on Locked On SEC. I want to remind you guys, too, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. It's like CNN, but with sports. Welcome in, Marler. We got to get to some of the big news. My goodness, Jimbo Fisher. Give me your reaction when you heard the news on Sunday, because we talked about it a week ago. Brent Zwerneman of the Houston Chronicle was here, and he was going to get another year. How shocked were you?
I was pretty shocked. I think I was shocked because I got the text at like 8 o'clock in the morning from a buddy of mine, my co-host, Tyler Huck, who's a Florida State alum. And he hates Jimbo. And I was like, there's no way. There's perfect pick. There's just no way. There's no way they did that. And then I was like, man, hold on. They're like an hour behind, too. This is like a 7 a.m. firing on a Sunday. That's a tough start. And then, of course, I get on Twitter, and it's everywhere to be found. And he's been, let go. And they made the decision apparently on Thursday, which was surprising because I don't know if I've ever seen in the regular season. And I don't mean the last game of the season, because I know what happened in the Egg Bowl a couple of years ago. I don't know if I've ever seen in the middle of the season 2 coaches get fired for the same game, especially when one of them won by 41 points. But, very interesting because the money standpoint, I will say this. I thought this was the case. And if you're going to raise $76 million, right? Like the difference between this year and next year is $9 million. Like, you were going to have to pay 67 next year if you fired him then versus 76 now. So in the grand scheme of things, 9 is not crazy. I think that when you talk about him losing 9 straight games on the road, they're 10-11 since the start of last year. That's also not good. Just not great against ranked opponents, all that kind of stuff. But when you start breaking down what Jimbo Fisher took, when he's going to walk away with, when all is said and done, the total with the buyout with his first 3 years under contract versus his next 2, where they doubled down and re-upped his contract. When all is said and done, he's going to walk away with $125.5 million for being a 7-5 coach on average per year. That's insane. That's insane.
And the crazy part is, what was the stat? His first job as the OC at Samford, he made $20,000, and now he'll make, for the next 8 years, he'll make $20,000. Yeah, $20,000 a day.
$26,000 a day.
That's stupid. I mean, you don't make that in a year. So
yeah, exactly. I'm still the OC at Samford on weekends, so it's perfect.
You have an early thought on who they should go get? I know Mike Elko's name's been out there, but I'm like, is that the sexy name? Like, get rid of Jimbo to go hire Mike Elko? Like,
I love the idea of them getting Jeff Traylor from UTSA. I think UTSA, right?
Yeah, is he ready? Like, that's a huge step up. They were in the Sun Belt, just joined the AAC, and he's going to go from the AAC to SEC playing Texas and Oklahoma.
I would feel better about it if he hadn't dropped so far off this year, even with Frank Harrison as his quarterback, because that was an 11-win team a year ago. Dan Lanning is obviously, I think, the name. Like I've said this a while ago, and it's actually stuck. Like for who Bama has, we're following up after Saban, I would want Lanning. Like that's who I would want if you're Nick Saban. I think that is the name right now. I think that people are kind of crazy to think that Oregon's a stepping stone. Now, I know they're only paying $7 million a year now, but they're about to walk into a lot more money as a university. And I know that sounds dumb because Phil Knight is the owner, or up to the owner. Wow, but he basically is. He funds the whole thing.
Right.
At the same time, with all the TV money they're about to walk into with the Big Ten, he is going to get a bump, especially if they make the playoffs in year 2 of his tenure, all that kind of stuff. But he is the name. I think Elko is the best play because here's the thing, and we're gonna have Billy Lucci on the podcast tomorrow to talk about it. But here's the thing when you talk about what do you call it with A&M, just because they had all this money this time doesn't mean they have all this money to go out and make a splash higher the next time around. And it wouldn't kill you to have a little bit of stability. And I say this a lot, but it also wouldn't kill you to have a little bit of humility of hey, where are we as a program? What can we manage expectations? Because that whole idea of, hey, let's take this guy who won a national title 6 years ago, but is on a current sinking ship that he created for himself and then told everyone else that it wasn't his fault. We got him off the sinking ship, gave him way too much money, then doubled that down and gave him even more money.
Wait, were you talking about Jimbo or Dabo? Because that describes Dabo as well.
Jimbo is who I'm talking about, but I tell you what, A&M's already a cult. I don't know why you don't go after Dabo.
It'd be the perfect flip, home run high, big name, splash higher, that would make a lot of sense.
He would love it there. I
still think, to me, Lane makes the most sense from a standpoint of he would be good there. Lane just said Saturday night after the Georgia loss. You know what he said? He said, we got to recruit better. He said that we had 1 5-star. They had 24. He goes, we got to recruit better. Guess who's recruiting well? A&M. You can buy any recruit you want. He's got a ceiling at Ole Miss, right? This is the best Lane can do at Ole Miss. 10 wins. He goes to A&M. All the social media crap aside, I think just as a football coach, who's think all the stability he's provided at quarterback at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
They've not had that at A&M.
Well, it's partially because they had a 5-star quarterback has been knocked out of the season, which is also Pepper says hello. My dog is growling at something.
Haynes King and all these dudes they've had.
He's also 5-star.
Yeah, but
he's doing pretty well at Georgia Tech this season.
Well, but Jackson Dart's been incredible this year and last year at Ole Miss.
Right. Yeah, agreed. I don't know. I just can't see Lane. Just can't see Lane going to Midnight Yell.
Come on. But Texas
guns. Pepper.
Stark versus Kiffin next year. Texas versus Texas A&M. My God, that'd be
fun. That'd be fun.
Quick thought on Zach Arnett, because look, this just didn't work out. I mean, you admire him for what he was able to do, take over a tough situation with the passing of Mike Leach, but this just didn't work at all.
Yeah, hats off to Mississippi State for taking a guy who was in the most difficult and probably most unique, negatively unique situation in the entire country, and knowing full well that you're Mississippi State and you've gotten over 9 wins in a season, maybe a handful of times total in your entire program history. Haven't won the SEC since World War II. I'm sorry, it was actually before World War II, because it was 1941, before the U.S. didn't even get involved until December 7th of 1941. So it was before then. So hats off to Mississippi State for going above and beyond, being total a-holes, and firing this guy in game 9 of his tenure. That is, I hope they lose every game they play next year. That you never want to be the guy that replaces the guy. And the fact that they came in here and this guy who was done really well there for you and held everything together during the worst possible time, I was shocked. And I don't think he's necessarily ready to be a head coach, but there's a better way to have done this. There's a better way to have done this, and it wasn't this.
There's some interesting names out there. Obviously, some up and comers like Lance Leipold, whatever his name is, at Kansas. His name's been thrown out there. John Sproul at Troy, he's done a really good job. Willie Fritz at Tulane. These are also names that, okay, they would be safe, good hires for Mississippi State. But to me, the one that would be just awesome, Dan Mullen. Bring Mullen back. Yeah. I mean, that would be kick-ass.
Yeah.
Who would be your pick?
Jamie Chadwell makes sense. He's from Liberty, the guy from Liberty in Coastal Carolina. I honestly thought he would get a shot at Auburn last year. I thought he'd get a shot at a couple other places last year. I was very shocked for him to make what I thought was a lateral move, maybe even a move back from Coastal Carolina to Liberty. But yeah, I mean, Mullen would be great. But I think here's the thing: if you're Mississippi State, you need to Leach was a perfect hire because Leach was what that university was. He was an 8-win coach, and that's an 8-win program at best, every single year. And he had that fun offense. They're able to do whatever, through the air. And Will Rogers at quarterback put up some great numbers. And they had some fun wins under Leach, right? The LSU one in 2020, which turned out to be not as impressive as we all thought, but that's a great way to start his tenure. You're going to have to find a way to differentiate yourself, because you're already up against Lane Kiffin in state for the long run. I know you beat him last year, but for the long run, you're up against it. You're not going to have divisions, but your next door neighbor is Hugh Freeze and Nick Saban, and that's not going to get any better for you than it's been already. You're not going to outpace LSU in anything. I mean, where do you think Mississippi State ranks in terms of jobs in the SEC right now? With Oklahoma and Texas coming in.
Yeah, it's in the lower half or lower third, I guess you would say, right now. But hey, some guys might, Willie Fritz can go there, and he could probably be there for the next 10 years and go 8-4, and they'd love him, right? I mean,
well, the next 8 years. I mean, they just fired a guy after halfway through November in year 1, so.
Yeah, that's true. All right, more with Chris Marler here in just a sec. And I want to remind you guys, this episode presented to you by our friends over at FanDuel. You can score throughout this NFL and college season. With FanDuel, they are America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers are getting $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. And when you're talking about the college games, I was just looking at the lines a minute ago. Right now, Georgia is a 10.5-point favorite on the road at Tennessee up at FanDuel. Kentucky is a 1.5-point favorite at South Carolina. And Mizzou is an 11.5-point home favorite versus Florida. If you feel a certain way on any of those matchups, go make it happen. The app is super easy to use at FanDuel. And they got a wide range of betting options, spreads, player props, over-unders. All of it is there for you. Go check them out. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get this NFL season and college season. Get involved before the season ends. FanDuel is the official partner of the All right, as we dive back into it with our buddy Chris Marler. Marler, this is that dreadful cupcake week in the SEC. Everybody's playing a slappy except for 6 schools that are all playing each other. So let's dive in. Just a quick thought on each one of these quick hitters as we run through it. 6-4 Kentucky at 4-6 South Carolina. Kentucky a 2-point road favorite.
That sounds about right. This should be a low-key good game. Kentucky's owned this series. I as much as I dislike the hype that Kentucky seems to get every year now as this overachieving underachiever, I still think that they're probably the better overall team than South Carolina. South Carolina, they're coming off a very, very impressive win. And I know it's Vandy, but they beat Vandy, unlike a lot of teams have beaten Vandy this year, a week ago. So could be a really good situation for them. You know, you're getting closer to being bowl eligible, right? They have to win 2 more games. I think both of them are winnable. I would take Kentucky, but wouldn't be surprised at all if South Carolina is able to pull it out.
Yeah, it'd be huge if South Carolina wins this one and then they have to beat Clemson for a bowl game. Oh man, it's all like Donkey Kong. 5-4 Florida going at number 9 Mizzou. And we just mentioned Mizzou is a double-digit favorite. Florida was a double-digit underdog to LSU a week ago, and they were in that game for a while. And then Jaden Daniels did Jaden Daniel things and pulled away.
Yeah, one of my good buddies, George Simpson, we actually coached the Hammond Skyhawks here in Columbia, South Carolina about, oh my God, it was 15 years ago. Yikes. It was middle school too. We were not very good, mainly because of me. He brought up a really good point this week, and he's a diehard Florida fan, and he said, the thing that was most concerning about Florida and LSU, and that is this. Florida put up pretty good numbers on LSU, right? But when you look at what LSU's defense has given up to everyone else, it was kind of middle of the road. And that defense got torched by LSU's offense, which has happened to a lot of teams. But it doesn't make me feel great about what they're about to face this weekend. It's at Mizzou, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like another great chance for Mizzou. I know that Florida's not great by any means. They're 5-5 right now, trying to scratch their way and get to bowl eligibility. I don't know if it's going to be like as impressive as a win as it probably has been in years past, obviously. But like really good chance for Mizzou as a program to show like, hey, just got a top 10 ranking, just dominated Tennessee on national television. We are legit. We deserve to be here. And this is another step in the right direction of like, being able to get in, like, don't be the team that is able to get a big win. Be as consistent as you've been throughout most of the year and reel off several in a row. And I think that it's really important for what Eli Drinkwitz is trying to build in the long run to win this game and win it in convincing fashion. So I like Mizzou. I like them to win pretty handily, to be honest.
Quick thought on Napier. Obviously they were 5-2. If he loses to Mizzou and loses to Florida State, he's going to be 5-7. So that's 5 straight losses. If he gets blown out in these last 2, and by blown out, I mean you lose, let's say 45-14 at Mizzou and 52-7 to Florida State, you fire him?
I don't think that's going to happen. So I can't, I don't know. I genuinely don't know how I would react to that, because here's the other thing. And I know he lost 2 commits this week, but he's got in his back pocket almost a little bit of what in the SEC can be a get out of jail free card. That's the fact that, hey man, I got a top 5 recruiting class coming in. Like, I know it's bad right now, but I got a top 5 recruiting class like coming in. And this is like this rebuild, everyone thinks because it's Florida that it should be super quick. McElwain got us to an SEC East championship. Yeah, he got you an SEC East championship because everyone else in the division was awful.
Yeah.
Georgia was down a lot. Tennessee historically down. And the rest of the conference was as is. You know, I've heard this floated out there a bunch. Will Muschamp was even able to get to 11 wins. Okay, so what? Like the turnaround for this, like not everything is apples and oranges. And I think that or apples to apples. I mean, this whole thing with Dan Mullen and what he like the situation he left it in for just not recruiting, I think was a little bit more difficult than people thought. So I don't think you fire him, but it would be very helpful if he did not lose those games by a combined 80 points, like you said.
All right, last one of a game of consequence this week. It's number 1 Georgia at number 18 Tennessee, and it takes all down team, Marler, because you know if if Auburn or Ole Miss had beat Georgia last week, this could be they could be playing for the SEC East.
Yeah.
But Tennessee goes and loses to Mizzou, so it didn't even matter. But it feels like Knoxville's going to be rocking. They're going to be fired up for this game.
Really?
I think so. Dolly Parton's going to be there, so they'll be fired up.
I think that the stadium will probably be a lot like the first half against Alabama, and that is, man, it was super fun for the first half of it, and then like you've seen for the last 3 times that Georgia has visited Knoxville, it's going to be empty, and it'll be empty early. I will say this: it is interesting to me that Tennessee came out as only a 10-point underdog. That is very surprising. With the way that Kirby has dominated in general, but especially the SEC East, he has 4 road losses as a head coach at Georgia, and they're all against SEC West opponents. He's never lost to an SEC East team on the road. I think that probably continues, but I say this all the time with Georgia, you got to put them in a spot that they're unfamiliar with, and that is like if you can get them close late in the game. This is like they were close with Auburn, they were able to pull out a victory. This isn't Jordan Hare, and that's not like a slight to Jordan Hare, but it's a little bit more intense than that. And also, this team is like this roster is built a lot better than some of the teams that they've already faced. So if they can hang around late, I believe in it, and it would be a hell of a win for Josh Heupel. But I think Georgia rolls.
So you like we like Kentucky against South Carolina?
I'll take Kentucky over South Carolina.
Yeah. Mizzou against Florida and Georgia against Tennessee?
Yes.
All right. We will lock it in. I will bet my life savings on it, and we'll make some money. He is Chris Marler. Of course, follow him on Twitter at VernFunquist, VERN. Of course, check him out on the Saturday Football Uncensored podcast. Marler, always fun. We'll do it again next week.
Sounds good, brother. Talk to you then.
All right, that's Chris Marler there. And that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys so much for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Come on back tomorrow on the show. We'll be getting you set for SEC Week 12. Look, I know it's a cupcake week. I know there's a lot of games that just don't really matter, but we got some that do. Again, Florida, Mizzou, Georgia, Tennessee, and South Carolina, Kentucky. We'll be breaking it all down. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow right here on an all-new edition of Locked On SEC.